Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. Today I wanted to have a bit of a catch up, a bit of a check-in about reading and what you're reading, and I thought I would do this with the end of the year book tag because I don't think I've ever done it before, which would be fun, but I also wanted to film a video like this to kind of remind myself of videos and also reading and the concept of Booktube. Because I feel like I had some time off because I went on holiday and then threw myself back into work, and then I got like the super cold, and believe me, I'm not used to being ill anymore. Now we're all wearing masks. I felt like a Victorian child with a fever, and I haven't been doing anything, so I thought this tag would be a good way to, I guess, check in and see what you're also reading. The first question is, are there any books you started this year but need to finish? And the answer is yes. I'm a very slow reader, and I swear I can be reading some books for literally years. But the two I've actually picked are ones I just started, or I'm going to start today. And the first one is The Private Lives of the Tudors by Tracy Borman. As you all know, I'm a massive Tudor geek. I pretty much read every Tudor non-fiction book I can get my hands on, and Tracy Borman is one of my favourite historians that I kind of go to, but I haven't read this one, which is a real surprise because this is like social history at its best, and those intimate details and those things that we can gain by looking at receipts of households and portraiture, and I just know I'm gonna love it, and I don't know why I haven't read this one. The fact that I've read like a book about Thomas Cromwell but not this one, which in my mind would be like my perfect history book, but I've just started it and I'm really enjoying it, as you know I knew I would be, so I definitely want to finish this year and hopefully this month. I'm aware that both of these are just like I'm currently reading, which isn't really the nature of this question, but you know I do want to finish them before the end of the year, and I am a slow reader but I don't want to be like this slow. And the next one is actually one that I'm going to start today because today's Halloween, and every year I always read a book about witches, and normally it's non-fiction, but when I went on my birthday bookshop crawl, which I have a video of, Ben very kindly brought me this, and it's kind of, you know, 17th century historical fiction written by a poet. Sounds wonderful, and I know that I'll be able to just sit this evening and just read it. For me, this book just sounds like the perfect evening. I'm gonna switch off all the lights, I'm gonna read by candlelight tonight with some atmospheric music on, and just adore this. But yeah, they're what I'm currently reading. I don't have massive reading plans for the rest of the year. I'm just gonna see what happens, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of finishing and starting these two. The next question is, do you have any autumnal books to transition into the end of the year? And my answer would have to be, again, the Manningtree Witches. I realise I forgot to say the title of that book, but I always read, you know, a witch book in this season, and it kind of, I guess, I feel like autumn is pretty late this year. Like, I feel like the trees are only just changing colour in London. I don't know if that's like in other places, in England especially, if it feels like it's been late this year. So I feel like my actual autumnal reading is quite late, but I think just because the manner of this being very witchy, this is my chosen book. I've just realised that Sybil has like bitten. Yeah, she's like bitten. She hasn't chewed it, she did just like little puncture marks. I don't know the obsession, I know it's because of her teeth, but the obsession she has with like biting my hardbacks is kind of insane. But I know in the video when I bought this book, I showed this in the video, but I just want to show it again because I just love this colour. I just really love this colour. The Manningtree Witches is the book that I haven't read that is going to kind of transition me into the rest of the year, but I also wanted to recommend a book that I've only just finished that I think is the perfect autumnal read, just because for me it feels like it's like going home reading this book, to be honest, and which is kind of ironic because of the book, but it is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I was actually quite hesitant to read this book, especially after it then went and like won the Women's Prize, just because of how much I love Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Like, that book is such a part of my being, that I just didn't know if it could be done again, but it has, and I do want to talk about this book separately. Even in its darkness and complexity, there is something comforting about this book, and I think it's because it is Susanna Clarke, and I felt like she was kind of inviting me over to sit by the fire with a cup of cocoa and just read and just live within these pages. It felt like an invitation from an old friend that I knew the language of, that I knew I was in for a good time. I really can't explain it. When I was trying to explain this feeling of how I felt reading this book, I kept going back to the scene in Narnia, in the first Narnia film, where Mr. Tumnus is like playing on his pipe thing, and Lucy is, you know, she's had her cocoa and she's falling asleep, and then, but it's magical, it feels like you're home, but there's a darkness, there's an unsettling undertone as well. But at the same time, because you know that you're with an author who can just write so beautifully and just knows exactly where she's taking you, that you can just completely give in to her. None of that makes sense. But you know, if you like mazes, and you like kind of albatrosses, it's a great read. But yeah, dark, unsettling, such a good book. So if you haven't got a book yet to kind of transition you into the end of the year, I think Piranesi is the one. I feel like Piranesi will transition you to any point in your life, any season. It will transition you from all of your big life stages until the day you die. It certainly will do me. I don't know why I'm this intense about books. I think it might be a character flaw. I think after all that intensity, we should move on to a new question. Is there a new release you're waiting for? So the answer is probably no. I actually haven't really been keeping up with new releases this year, especially when I kind of left corporate publishing, because I felt like I was constantly being told about all the new books coming out all the time, not like even from the imprint I was working on. And so I think when I left corporate publishing, I was a bit like, I'm just gonna sit back and just find books and not like obsess over their release dates. And so I haven't been keeping track. So there aren't any like new releases coming out in kind of November and December, but I'm also very lucky to kind of have quite a few books that I read sent to me by publishers, so I tend to be reading quite a few months in advance anyway. And so I wanted to kind of highlight one proof that I received, which actually I'm really excited to read this year. And it comes out in February, and it is Devotion by Hannah Kent. I'm so excited to read this book. It's a historical novel about Australia and the German influence on Australia. I actually have a really big love of Australian nature writing, and I really like Australian literature, and Hannah Kent is also, I think, one of the best historical fiction writers out there, but it's also a queer love story, which personally makes me very happy, and I haven't actually, I feel like, read much queer literature this year. I feel like I've let myself down a bit. My representation, you know, for myself has not been good this year. It's got a brilliant quote on the back from Sarah Winman: "A mighty, impassioned cry to love and the land, beautiful, poetic, and most importantly, queer." So that's why I want to read it. So yes, I know this is cheating because this is technically 2022, but for me, in a way, this is 2021. But yeah, Devotion. The next question is, what are 3 books you want to read before the end of the year? And to be honest, because I'm such a slow reader, like I would literally only read 1 book a month sometimes, in fact quite a lot of times, it probably will just be these books, but I am going to kind of some history lectures and a whole day of like Tudor lectures soon. So I know I'll probably pick up some of those books from the academics in attendance, like Tudors in Love by Sarah Griswood, and I know I'll probably read that before the end of the year. But to be honest, I really don't make reading plans anymore. I'm a complete mood reader, but I also just kind of read off interest. So if I suddenly get obsessed with Vikings like I am now, I know that I'm going to read 5 books about Vikings, and that's fine. But I wouldn't know if an interest is coming until it suddenly arrives. So me kind of actually saying these are the books I'm going to read is kind of pointless, because I just never stick to it, so I never do a TBR. It's also non-fiction in November, and even though I always like have a non-fiction book on the go, I always have a history book with me at all times. It's the thing I read most. I think I'm gonna try and have a look at some more history books that I would like to read this year, but I do think it will be quite influenced by where my interest goes right now. I really want to read and research some books about Anglo-Saxon history, which I know nothing about, but I haven't really decided yet. Is there a book you think could still shock you and become your favourite book of the year? I feel like I'm always surprised by the books I'm reading, and that's a really good thing. This year I think I already know which is the book that is unexpectedly going to be one of my top reads of the year, and also probably one of the most influential books of my life in its own little way, and it is River Kings by Jarman. So I went to the Jorvik Centre in York having no real interest in Viking history, came out, was completely obsessed, which is the reason you should go to museums, and also is the reason I think it's really important that museums have those like live sections when you like walk around and see, well, you don't walk around, you're in a little boat, but when you see the history come to life, I think it's really valuable, especially for children. And I say especially for children, but I found that little boat ride life-changing. You basically go around like Viking York. I loved it. But anyway, this book is amazing, and I think why it's going to be one of my top reads of the year is because it made me think about Vikings really differently. It challenged a lot of, it's challenged a lot of the academic research, but a lot of my kind of presumptions about the Vikings. I was just absolutely fascinated by, the Islamic world and the Vikings, and, this tiny little bead that Jarman chases all across the world, and just how much influence the Vikings had, and the fact that when one invasion kind of comes and ends and different centuries come and go, it's not like they wake up and everybody changes what they're wearing or changes the language in which they speak, and just how much kind of we've merged all these different influences in our history was fascinating. But because I think it has really influenced my own interest in history and has challenged what I'm interested in history, and really just lit, lit a bulb. I don't know what the saying is, lit a fire underneath me, but kind of really sparked something that I think this is definitely going to be one of my top reads of 2021. The last question is, have you already started making reading plans for next year? And the answer is no. Because every single year I say it's going to be year of Dickens, and it's never a year of Dickens, so I just don't know why I make these plans with myself. I think, again, like I said about leaving kind of the corporate world, I wanted to take time away from putting pressure on myself to read loads of new books and therefore make loads of plans and structure my time. I've also, for the first year, I've stopped charting my reading publicly, like on a Goodreads or anything. Everything I now do is private, and I've now gone back to just having my little reading journal, which has been really lovely. And because of that and just wanting to take pressure off myself, I just haven't made any plans. I also have a suspicion that 2022 is going to be super busy. 2021 has been way busier than I thought because I got a new job and got a cat, which has taken a lot of time away from me, I feel. There are just a potential few big life things happening next year, like hopefully we're going to get married, third time lucky, even though that is just one day, but because we've had so many cancellations, I've made it, in my mind it's a way bigger deal. But also it's a big life event. It's a nice thing that's happening, finally. But we're also kind of thinking about 2022 being the year that we leave London. And even though we don't know if that will happen, it will probably be the end of 2022 if it does happen. But because of that, I kind of want to spend some time next year, because we'll definitely be leaving, if not in 2022, we'll definitely be leaving in 2023. I kind of, want to spend time in the city, exploring and kind of using that time, doing that, and not necessarily, why am I talking about my life? This isn't an update. But I just don't want to put a big plan on myself to say, I have to read this many classics or this many Dickens novels or this many history books, because I just don't know what life has in store. I feel like the pandemic has taught me, getting a new job kind of unexpectedly has taught me that I just can't plan. And I am a person who, if I make a plan and don't stick to it, I just beat myself up. And I don't really want to take that energy into my life now. I've grown up past that. That is a really, again, too intense, Claire. It's a really in-depth way of saying I don't know what I'm going to read next year. No definite plans, but there are a few history books that kind of come out in paperback, so I know I'll read those next year, but I now can't remember what they are. But yes, so this has been my end of year book tag, created by the wonderful Ariel Bissett. I hope you enjoyed my answers, however chaotic, and I'll see you again soon in another video.